Rounds 3, 4, and 5 of the Twitter files have been released. Chris Beck, a Navy SEAL, detransitions. The Museum of Modern Art sells a Picasso for $37 million. And my interview with Masi Alinejad, an Iranian American who was exiled from Iran for speaking out against the government. I'm Julie Hartman, and this is Timeless. Welcome everyone. Today is Tuesday, December 13th, 2022. I hope that you had a great weekend. Now I want to remind you that I say I hope you had a good weekend on a Tuesday because Tuesdays are the first days of the week that Timeless premieres. On Mondays, there's Dennis and Julie, which comes out at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, and then the remaining days of the week, Timeless premieres. So it's great to be with you. The first big story of the day is that rounds 3, 4, and 5 of the Twitter files were posted this past weekend and yesterday. Now, I know that it's a lot to digest and it's a lot to read through these things. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a break from the details that I feel like are bombarding us everywhere. And I'm just going to try to distill the main takeaways into 3 points. The first main takeaway of the Twitter files that have been released over the past few days is that Twitter was saying things in public that their private correspondents knew to be untrue. And the biggest thing is that they said publicly that they were not shadow banning people, but in fact, they actually were. And specifically, they were targeting conservatives and conservative tweets. In fact, there was one actor, James Woods, who expressed support for Donald Trump and flagged a tweet that Twitter had flagged of Donald Trump's and said, "Why is Twitter suppressing him?" The second takeaway is that Twitter was working hand in glove with the federal government and especially the FBI to suppress conservative content. One of the biggest names that has come out of this Twitter files saga has been James Baker. James Baker was a Twitter employee under the previous administration, and he was instrumental in advising Twitter back in October of 2020 to suppress the Hunter Biden story. He wrote in an email to his colleagues that he had reason to believe that the Hunter Biden materials had been hacked, and he said, and I quote, "Caution is warranted." Now, the Twitter files have exposed that James Baker wasn't just a regular old Twitter employee. Before he took the job at Twitter, in fact, just 2 or 3 years before, he was general counsel of the FBI. Takeaway number 3 is that Twitter knew that many of these people who they were shadow banning were not, in fact, violating their terms of service. So one of the biggest examples that I dug up of this over the past weekend as I was researching this is that Trump back in October of 2020 tweeted a pretty benign message. He said that there were big discrepancies in the ways that mail-in balloting were being counted across the country. Now, of course, this is true. The biggest example of this was in Pennsylvania, where in some counties like Philadelphia, ballot counters would still accept mail-in ballots even if they had faulty signatures or faulty dates. But in other counties like Westmoreland County, they would throw out ballots that had faulty signatures or faulty dates. So that is one very clear instance of irregularities. Another big discrepancy happened in Wisconsin, where the election clerks of Wisconsin's 2 biggest Democratic counties actually falsely advised their constituents to claim that they were indefinitely confined in order to avoid having to present an ID when mailing in their ballot. Now, this was a huge error, and it resulted in 195,000 out of the 1 million Wisconsin voters who voted by mail to not vote with an ID. even though the law requires it, because they went through this loophole where they claimed that they were disabled or sick, i.e. indefinitely confined, and so they didn't have to present the ID. That's just to say there were many examples that there were discrepancies in the way that mail-in ballots were handled across the country. So Trump's tweet was in fact correct. And you can see the internal deliberations of the Twitter employees under the previous administration, and they are acknowledging that that tweet was actually correct. And yet still, they choose to flag it because they say, and I'm quoting, they're choosing to flag it given its POTUS. That's their only reason. Given its POTUS, we are going to flag this as misinformation. So they're essentially admitting, privately on their Slack channels, which Elon Musk has now exposed, that the only reason why they suppressed that particular tweet and many other tweets of Donald Trump is given that it's Trump. So I'm going to keep you updated on the Twitter files, but again, I just wanted to give you a little break of all of the details that are being thrown at us. But another big thing that I do want to make you aware of before we move on is the way that the mainstream media is reacting to this. It is really disappointing to see them yawn and try to play this off like it's no big deal. The Atlantic published an article over the past few days that said Elon Musk's Twitter files are bait. Twitter files entries, they say in this article, are sloppy, anecdotal, devoid of context, and, well, old news. Another example comes from Vanity Fair. On Friday, they published a piece that asks, what new information has actually emerged from these splashy document dumps known as the Twitter files? What new information emerged? That the Twitter execs were working alongside the FBI and lying about it to suppress conservative content. Isn't that worth noting, Vanity Fair? Another headline came from Rolling Stone. They said Elon Musk's big Twitter files reveal turns into a snooze fest. And then they said later, that headline was about Twitter files round 1. Then they said about Twitter files round 3 that Trump ban proves trilogies are a letdown. So they called it a letdown. The Young Turks called it a nothing burger, and CNN and the New York Times have barely, if at all, acknowledged the contents of the Twitter files, and they have said instead that Elon Musk's Twitter will now normalize hate speech. The thing that I keep thinking about throughout this whole story is, can you just imagine if the shoe were on the other foot? If the FBI was working with Twitter to suppress liberal content? If Obama tweeted a perfectly factually accurate statement and Twitter decided to flag it just given that he's the president? It's absurd. And given that we're only on round 5 of these Twitter files, and probably at least 10 more will be released, this is probably just the tip of the iceberg. So again, we will certainly continue to keep you updated. Moving on to another shocking story that emerged yesterday, a retired United States Navy SEAL officer who served in Iraq and Afghanistan named Chris Beck, who is also known as a transgender woman named Kristen Beck, has now decided that he is detransitioning and returning back to his original name. He became famous back in 2013 for announcing publicly that he was transgender. I believe it was on CNN. And the liberal media ran with this. And now he is saying that becoming transgender, quote, destroyed my life. And that he wants to help young kids who are falling prey to this, both in schools and among doctors. He said in his statement yesterday that this apparatus is a billion-dollar industry that takes advantage of confused young people and makes them transgender. He says, I walked into a psychologist's office and in one day I had a letter in my hand saying that I was transgender. I was authorized for hormones. I was authorized for all of this other stuff. There are thousands of gender clinics being put up all over America. And then the next day you're on hormones. the same hormones that they are using for medical castration of pedophiles. Now they are giving this to healthy 13-year-olds, he says. So it's important to remember that Chris Beck was the mainstream media's main go-to transgender spokesperson over the past few years. He famously opposed Donald Trump's ban on having transgender individuals serve in the military. So it's a pretty big deal that he has come out and said that he is detransitioning, and that he has said that it was such a big mistake so publicly. We, the United States, seem to be an outlier country in promoting this so-called gender affirmation surgeries. Other countries do it, but they don't do it as much as we are. And the sad thing is, and this is what Chris Beck is exposing, is that we are experimenting on people as if they are guinea pigs. And not just people, we are experimenting on young children as if they are guinea pigs. We are literally giving them the drugs to castrate them, and they're the same drugs that pedophiles are given when they are castrated. We take 10-year-olds in schools and we teach them that it's a totally natural thing to question their gender. I guest hosted for Dennis yesterday in his radio show, and I covered a story that the American Girl doll franchise has come out with a new book aimed at children 10 and older that attempts to explain puberty and hormones and the birds and the bees, kind of the necessary information one would need to know as they enter that age range. And this new issue has a large section of it that deals with body dysmorphia and transgenderism. And I read a passage on air where the book explicitly says it's okay. And I don't know if they explicitly said normal, but they implied it is normal to feel confused about your body. And if you do feel confused about your body, you can go to a doctor, this is what the book says, and ask for certain medicine that can delay your puberty. Or if you don't feel comfortable going to a doctor or telling your parents about this, go to the end of the book and look at these lists of organizations that will help you do it without parental consent. So this is an epidemic that woke mobsters are teaching our youth. And the important thing here that I want to highlight with regard to this transgender issue is that there is a huge difference between tolerance and enthusiastic endorsement and support. Over the past few years, a lot of LGBTQ and transgender groups have said all we want in our policy positions, in our attempt to influence culture, all we want is tolerance. Tolerance is the willingness to accept the behavior that other people do, even if you don't agree with it. And tolerance is a necessary and important part of pluralistic societies. A democratic pluralistic society such as ours cannot function unless we lend tolerance to one another. But the thing that I want to impart to you today is that this is not tolerance. This whole apparatus that Chris Beck highlights, this billion-dollar industry between the schools and the medical practice and our TVs and movies, this is not trying to create an environment of tolerance. This is trying to proselytize people. This is trying to create converts. When I was in school and in my 9th grade health class, I was told that there was a segment of the population that identified as transgender. And I was grateful to learn about that because that's part of teaching or extending tolerance, to make people aware that there's a segment of the population who are transgender that exist. But that is way different than a teacher saying to students, as they do nowadays, "Are you sure you feel like a girl? Are you sure that dress is really a dress you want to wear, or is that just a gender stereotype? You know, if you don't feel like your gender, you can go to a doctor and they can give you puberty blockers." That is this creepy, weird phenomenon of trying to make that person transgender. It's actively trying to push the needle in another direction, and it's just odd. So again, people deserve tolerance, but this movement has gone so far that it is actively trying to convert people. And I hope that Chris Beck will continue to be a formidable opponent of this transgender push that we're seeing. I commend him for his bravery. Now, moving on to our final domestic story of today. A Picasso work has been sold for $37 million. A foundation for William Paley, who's the late founder of CBS, is selling several pieces of artwork worth millions of dollars that they long lent to the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. And the Paley Foundation is saying that they are selling these masterpieces to raise money so that MoMA can expand its digital footprint. And as I mentioned, one of the paintings being sold is Pablo Picasso's famous 1919 Cubist piece called Guitar on a Table. It was acquired by Paley in 1946, and it has been displayed at MoMA over the past several decades. But now, alongside many other masterpieces that MoMA is selling, it is back in private hands. There is a movement that has emerged over the past few years that has said that museums support and practice imperialism and colonialism. Those who support this idea say, among other things, that museums loot items from countries or civilizations without people's consent, and also they perpetuate colonialism by exalting white European standards of beauty, such as Picasso paintings. The second point is BS. But the first one, the looting point, I acknowledge may in some cases have some legitimacy. But let's notice here that if they really cared about accessibility and about taking power away from the rich, and all of these platitudes that they robotically repeat, these anti-museum wokesters should be very saddened to hear that a Picasso painting is being sold. What we don't realize is that museums are really only a creation of the past couple of 100 years. And before that, rich people were the only ones that had fine art. They held it in their mansions and in their estates, and if you weren't a member of the elite who went to these dinner parties and events at these houses, you would never be able to see these pieces of art. So this idea that museums are imperialistic is an example of overeducated foolery. What they don't acknowledge is that if you don't have museums, rich people are the ones who just have all the good stuff, and the rest of society will never be able to see these precious works of art. And this is the direction that we are going in. This Picasso work, alongside the other works that the Paley Foundation is selling, will likely never be seen again by the public. And it's sad that people don't seem to realize the problem that something like this presents for people's ability to access great works of art. But arguably the sadder part of this story is that people generally don't seem to care about art anymore, period. As I mentioned about a minute or two ago, MoMA is selling these pieces of art, they say, to increase their digital footprint. One of the ways they say that they are planning to do this is by creating an art-related streaming channel. And look, I'm sure that an art-related streaming channel is a good thing, but there is no substitute for being able to go and visit these museums and see these works of art in person. We as a society have lost respect for the eternal as well as for the physical and tangible. We don't think that good artwork is worth seeing in person anymore because we can just see it on our phones or we can see it in an art-related streaming service. And we don't think that good artwork is worth seeing anymore, period, because we don't have respect anymore for the traditional. We don't care about walking up close to a Picasso painting and seeing the brushstrokes, the color, the shading, and to feel the awe of standing in front of something that someone like Picasso touched. We have lost the intellectual and personal sophistication to appreciate an experience like that. And that, to me, is the saddest part of this story. And finally, for the second half of the show today, I'm going to play an interview for you that I conducted with Masi Alinejad. She is an Iranian activist who was born in Iran in 1976, but was actually exiled for the country for her speaking out against the government and its misogynistic policies. Now, some of you who have been watching the show over the past week know that last week in the episode entitled "And Iran," I gave a brief, simple, hopefully easy to understand history of the way that Iran has changed so dramatically over the past 60 years. I said that nowadays the Ayatollah is persecuting women for not wearing hijabs, but just 60 years ago, the Shah's soldiers were going out into the streets and ripping hijabs off of women. So I was very pleased to have the opportunity to talk with Ms. Alinejad. She continues to be a formidable female rights activist for the women of Iran. Actually, when I was interviewing her, she had a security guard there in the room with her, which shows the extent of her reach and how much the Iranian government is threatened by her activism. I hope that you enjoy this interview as much as I enjoyed conducting it. Let's play it. I am thrilled today to have Masi Alinejad here. I don't know if you know this, but you are the first guest that I'm having on my show since it only launched last week.
I'm very happy. Thank you so much for hosting me.
I could not have picked a better guest to have on. Masi is an Iranian-American activist. She was born in Iran in 1976. Sorry to give away your age, but it is important to the discussion. And she lived in Iran for most of the first part of her life until she was exiled for speaking out against the persecution of women. Now she lives in a safe house in New York City with her husband and her children, and she continues to be a prominent women's rights activist for women in Iran. And again, I'm thrilled to have you here. You don't understand, viewers. I hunted her down. I came in here and I said, I want you to come onto my show.
That means a lot to me.
Yes.
And don't forget, together we are stronger. Now it's all about
Yes.
women's revolution. I need you as well, and I'm happy to be with you.
Well, I am on your team. And those of you who've been watching Timeless know that a few days ago, I did a whole hour on the history of Iran, starting with Reza Shah, who was in power from 1941 until 1951. And then the Iranian people elected Mossadegh, right, as prime minister. See, I'm seeing if I have the history right, and I have you here to correct me. And then Reza Shah came back because the United States installed him again. And then there was the Iranian Revolution with Ayatollah Khomeini. So the reason why I said just now that you were born in 1976 is because you were born 3 years before the Iranian Revolution. So tell me, what was your life like in your beginning years in Iran?
You actually had an amazing research about the history of Iran. Wasn't you yourself shocked that the revolution, the Islamic revolution itself, became a revolution against women? Because Iran is the only country, when you look back to the history, it's like you're looking to the future that we want to have. I know that there was lack of, like a lot of people were like, I'm being in touch with them, saying that we overthrew the regime Shahs because we were looking for more political freedom. When I talked to my parents, they were saying that we overthrew the Shah's regime because we were looking for, they were suffering from poverty. But what happened? Now the poor getting poorer in Iran, honestly, lack of electricity, lack of water. A lot of people are not even able to go to school in Baluchistan, in Zahedan, in Kurdistan. And the relative of the Ayatollahs are getting richer. And about political freedom, we not only gained political freedom, we lost all the social freedom that we already had. Before the revolution, women were allowed to go to a stadium. We had female judges. We had female ministers. Women were allowed to dance, to sing. We had so many beautiful and amazing singers, female singers. Like we have our own Beyoncé. But they all were forced to leave Iran. Why? Because the Islamic Republic became a revolution against women. This is the reality, and it's shocking. Now, women in the street are actually chanting that we want freedom, we want to be our true self, we want to have a normal life, and for that, paying a huge price.
See, people my age don't know the history, and this is why it's so important to talk about that. Nowadays, women in the street, like Masa Amini, who was killed in September, are being persecuted by the Ayatollah for showing hair or not wearing the hijab properly, when under the Shah, it was the exact opposite. The Shah was going into the streets, or his soldiers, and ripping the hijabs off of women. And so in 79, during the revolution, and please correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that there was a good percentage of Iranian citizens who wanted to see a more traditional Persian culture return to Iran, because they thought that the Shah, who was installed by Americans, had taken that away, and it was a bit of an affront to Iranian culture. So is that a fair characterization?
I think that the moment that Iran needed to have a reform, suddenly, by the help of many left outside Iran, many allies of the Ayatollah Khomeini outside Iran, they thought of overthrowing the Shah's regime.
Right.
But now, when we need a revolution,
right.
the same people saying that we need a reform. So for me and millions of young generation in Iran, we believe that right now Iranian people have agency, and before as well. But this is the time that we want to have a secular democratic regime. And this is not, I mean, when you mentioned about Masa Amini, it's so sad that before the revolution, my mother was free to have her own hijab. My mother was not kicked out from everywhere just because of wearing a beautiful headscarf. No. But now my mother actually sees that her daughter is being second-class citizens. So my mom was supporting the revolution. My mom and my parents were the part of, overthrowing the Shah's regime. And now they see that. What happened? Even the relative of Khomeini, the relative of Khamenei, all of them supporting the revolution, where are they?
Right.
They're here in America. They're in England. They are in the West and enjoying the Western freedom, not the Islamic revolution that they were supporting, and still some of them are supporting in America as well.
Right. Well, that's the point I was trying to highlight, because it seems as though a lot of people were happy to get rid of the Shah. But then in 1979, when the Ayatollah came in and was just so brutal in his persecution of women, I imagine that a lot of people were like, wait a minute, this is not what we signed up for. So you said that over the past 40 years, really what's motivated the regime is that persecution of women. Why? Why are women so important to them?
I have to actually say that.
Or not unimportant to them, clearly.
It's true. But look, even even the relative of the Ayatollahs, they are actually saying blessed to the Shah, because now the mullahs are. I was actually the one interviewing the spokesperson Mehdi Karoubi of Parliament, and he said, "Khuda pedar Shah ro biyamorze." What does it mean? Blessing to the Shah, and he was cursing the supreme leader. So
why? I'm just a little confused.
Because right now, people are getting raped in prison. Women are getting raped in prison. Like teenagers are getting raped. They are not political prisoners. They are the one that want to dance. They want to sing. They want to actually show their hair. The teenagers are like every teenagers around the world, no? So before the Islamic Revolution, there were political prisoners. I know that. So that's why many people were unhappy. But now, 16-year-old, 17-year-old, 15-year-old students, schoolgirls are in prison. I mean, I remember that right after the Islamic Revolution on TV, watching the political prisoners doing false confession. But can you believe that now teenagers are in TV and doing false confessions and saying that I regret now when I said that I want to show my hair? No, I hate my hair. I want to cover my hair. Now teenagers, right after getting free from prison, they committed suicide. Many of them committed suicide. And this is a huge concern. And that's why even the relative of the mullahs saying that the sister of Ayatollah Khamenei said that cursed his brother and saying that
They're even seeing that this is...
They even saying that. And they even announced that many of the children of the Ayatollahs, many of the children of Friday prayers, they are in prison because they took to the streets and joining the people. So, but about women, for the Islamic Republic, for ISIS, for Taliban, my body, your body is a political platform to write their manifest, to write their ideology on our body. The only way when you go to Iran, you understand this is a country being controlled by Islamic states, it's through us. Because we are carrying one of the most visible symbol of religious dictatorship, which is hijab. And that's why right after the revolution, that was the first step that Khomeini started to control the whole society through women.
Right.
And that is why when we talk about the brutal death of Masi Alinejad, and when women taking to the streets and burning their headscarf, we are not fighting against a small piece of cloth. Women are not just there in the streets facing guns and bullets and asking for, get rid of morality police or compulsory hijab laws. No, compulsory hijab is a symbol. We want to get rid of one of the most anti-women regime, one of the gender apartheid regime.
Yes, I pulled out my notebook here because you raised such an important point that the hijab is sort of a symbol of this broader persecution that exists. And I have some laws here that exist in Iran that marital rape is legal. Women and men are segregated in public spaces. The age of criminal responsibility for girls is 9, but for boys it's 15.
But right after the revolution, actually, they changed this age. And it's shocking. Women are not allowed to sing solo. If you say that to anyone, like in here, young generation in America, they cannot even believe that.
Yes.
People in the West, they pay money. They go to cinema or they sit and they eat their popcorns and they watch the Handmaid's Tale series, which is based on the book written by Margaret Atwood. So, but this fiction is our reality because women are getting raped at the age of 7 in the name of marriage. Mm-hmm. Women are not allowed to go to stadium. Can you believe that? Women are not allowed to travel abroad without getting permission from their husband. Women are not allowed to get a passport. Women who occupied more than 60% of universities are not mature enough to make decisions over their own body. That's not acceptable. So that is why I'm saying that this is one of the most progressive revolutions led by women, supported by men, and I don't get it. Where are the global feminist movement? Where are the well-known feminists like Oprah, like Michelle Obama? Where are those?
We are all wondering. It's an excellent question.
I mean, you tell me, why? Where is the Bring Our Girls Back campaign when Michelle Obama was behind it about the girls of Nigeria? This is the same. Girls are getting killed in Iran, teenagers. Nika was only 16-year-old. Sarina was only 17-year-old. I cannot believe that the leaders of, like the High Representative of EU, they are watching this.
I know. And they're silent. They're yawning at it.
Yeah, I want them to actually call for an international women's march because it's all about feminism. I mean, you cannot be a true feminist when you say, I condemn Burkini ban, I condemn Muslim ban, but when it comes to women ban, which I call it women ban, because all women are banned from entering Iran and Afghanistan if they don't cover themselves. When it comes to women ban, suddenly the feminists are quiet. This is called hypocrisy.
Well, to give you an idea of just how much hypocrisy and lack of self-awareness we have in this country, there's a university, Elon University in North or South Carolina, and you may be aware that they banned the word freshman for being used because it has the word man in it. And supposedly, and I read this the other day, I didn't understand that the word freshman somehow indicates that women would be good victims for rape.
Yeah.
I don't understand that connection, but to see what's going on in the United States, the lack of awareness.
I don't think it's lack of awareness about.
Right. Well, that's a very good point.
When it comes to Islamic Republic of Iran, it's not lack of awareness because look at Ilhan Omar. she is a Muslim, woman in America representing many young feminists. So she knows about the slogan, "My body, my choice." No, I remember the day that I was watching the all like Congress women wearing white. I was like, wow, such a powerful picture. All these women, wow, it's amazing. And it was very clear for me that when I reach out to them and I say that you're fighting for feminism, you're fighting for my body, my choice, then you can support us. I joined Women's March by putting headscarf, white headscarf on a stick, waving this and saying, "My body, my choice." And I was like, this is not lack of awareness. So my body, my choice, it's a common slogan. This is a political agenda. When it comes to Saudi Arabia, they all condemn women's rights abuse. When it comes to Yemen, they condemn human rights abuse. But when it comes to Islamic Republic, they don't. Some, they hate Trump. So, and they think that, okay, we have to. In America, I think this is black and white. But when it comes to feminism and women's rights in Iran, I think that Democrat and Republican should take a lesson that this should be a bipartisan issue. Why? Because believe me, the Islamic Republic, when they want to go and assassinate Americans, they don't care whether you are Republican or Democrat. They hate America anyway. So that's why I believe that this is not lack of awareness, this is political agenda, and we are trying to get their attention that, trust us, we the Iranians know the Islamic Republic the best, and this regime is going to end democracy. If we, Republican and Democrat, don't get united to end them, they will end democracy. They will end, not just democracy in Iran, in region, in Europe. I mean, this is not lack of awareness. This is political agenda, and it should be, pushed back.
Among people my age, it's a lack of awareness, but it's certainly at the people at the top, it is political agenda. So I want to ask you, what do you think the United States should be doing to help the people of Iran? We all know that President Biden just entered back into the Iranian nuclear deal, which will put Iran on the path to getting nuclear weapons, and President Trump famously pulled out of that when he was in office. Do you think getting back into the nuclear deal is a good idea for the United States?
I mean, to be clear, I'm coming from a very poor family. And I was one of them thinking that the nuclear deal would help the poor in Iran.
By giving them nuclear power.
No, but just having a nuclear deal between Iran and America. But what happened? I was the one witnessing that the benefit of nuclear deal didn't go to the poor in Iran. The benefit of the nuclear deal went to Syria, to Bashar Assad, went to Hamas and Hezbollah. The benefit of the deal, while the Iranian regime were putting the blame on America and saying that because of sanction we're suffering a lot, but right after the deal, the money went to the 51 religious institutions in Iran. Like one of them is Morality Police, who actually killed Masi Alinejad in the streets. So you see, this is what we all Iranians know. That yes, we were actually thinking that if we have a deal with the Western countries, finally we're going to be a normal country. We're not going to be isolated anymore. But that's wrong. So to answer your questions, now going back to the nuclear talk, it's only going to benefit the killers, because the money would go to the Revolutionary Guards, which are in the streets right now and killing innocent people. The money would go to the murderous regime, not to the people of Iran. And that's why I want Secretary Blinken to understand that. They have to declare that the nuclear deal is dead. If not, then we will see more dead bodies in the streets of Iran, everywhere, in prison in Iran. Because for many of Iranians now, we're not asking the American government to bring regime change for us, because we're doing that. We're doing that ourselves. We want them to stop saving our killers and murderers. Is that too much to ask?
I certainly don't think so. So I know that Iran had protests back in 2009 that were pretty big, but it seems like today is a bit of a different moment. Would you agree with that assessment?
Of course, of
So
course.
can you tell me why?
This is the first time, first of all, that we see that women are in front line burning one of the most visible symbol of the Islamic Republic, which
The
I
hijab.
always say that hijab is like the Berlin Wall for the mullahs. When we get successful to bring this wall down, believe me, the Islamic Republic won't exist. So this is a clear message of this uprising. And this is the first time in our history that we see well-known athletes, well-known actress. They came out and they say that we are not going to be part of the propaganda tool. They're quitting their jobs. This is the first time in our history that we see sense of unity among Iranian oppositions outside Iran, inside Iran. And this is the massive protest, which is diverse. It's like from Kurdistan to Balochistan, Arabs, Turks, men and women are united. And this is the longest protest in our history. Wow. So that makes it different. People are getting killed in the streets the day after, like instead of crying and mourning, people are there showing their anger and saying that we're not going to give up our fight. We are here to end the Islamic Republic. We even see the change of like the tone of the democratic countries. Their language has changed. They're actually seeing that. They are ready actually to accept an Iran without the Islamic Republic. Like I had a meeting with President Macron. He actually recognized it as a revolution. So that's why I think this time is different. People are determined to end the Islamic Republic. It's a marathon. This is the beginning of the end.
So what is something that someone like me could do, or my listeners? Because, you know, we were talking about the difference between people my age or people who are not in policy who may have a lack of self-awareness, and then the people at the top who make decisions. Obviously, those are two different categories. But I feel helpless. What can I do?
Actually, you actually mentioned a great point about your generation, about ordinary people, about high school students, about university students in America. You're right. I see lack of awareness, especially when I launched my campaign against compulsory hijab. I was actually being challenged by many young generation when I was giving talks saying that, but we thought that we shouldn't touch compulsory hijab issues because it's part of your culture, isn't it? And I was just, making awareness that how come forcing 7-year-old girl to cover herself, you call it part of a nation's culture? No, it's not. It's all about...
We've been so brainwashed.
It's all about freedom of choice. So you can do a lot, especially when teenagers and schoolgirls are getting killed. We need awareness among, like here, schoolgirls and schoolboys. Imagine a day they're holding the pictures of 62 children of Iran who got killed. That's going to actually have a huge impact if the Iranian regime sees that it's not as easy that they kill children and they can get away from it. No, all the schoolgirls around the world, they can get united and be the voice of Iranian students. And I think that it's if you show them a better picture of what our culture is, you can, because a lot of people here lack of awareness saying that if we help Iranian people, then Iran going to be Libya, Iran going to be Syria. No, you can compare our country to our own history right before the revolution. We're going to be, a country without Islamic Republic who lashes us, who execute us just because we want to be, we don't want to believe in any kind of religion. We want to get rid of morality police. We want to get rid of backward mullahs who rape teenagers in the name of marriage. So if you make awareness, I think that students, girls, women, teenagers in America can be the echo of the voice of Iranians by taking to the streets and showing their solidarity. That would scare the Iranian regime.
You make such an important point, because people nowadays, and I saw this so often in college, they're afraid to point out, no, it's not just a part of a country's culture that we can't make any judgments on to force women to wear hijabs. This is something that isn't okay. People are afraid to say that. They're so afraid.
Some of them are being brainwashed by some of the left and liberals saying that if you talk about compulsory hijab or Sharia laws, then you're causing Islamophobia. And the end. I'm going to just make long story short, and this is my last sentence. believe me, supporting your sisters in Iran and Afghanistan who are being beaten up, who are being kicked out from schools, doesn't make you Islamophobic. And as a woman who grew up under Sharia law, I have the right to be scared of Islamic ideology. I have the right to be scared of being lashed, being executed, being second-class citizens. So my mom is a Muslim woman. I'm not scared of Muslim women, but I am scared of Islamic states. I am scared of Taliban. I am scared of ISIS. I am scared of Islamic Republic. And that's why I call on all of you in America, everywhere. You have to be scared of Islamic dictatorship. So that's why in this battle, we are all together. If you're a true feminist, if you really believe in women's rights, this is one of the historical revolution being led by Iranian women and women of Afghanistan, and you have to show a global sisterhood and solidarity. If not, then you are supporting our oppressors. That's it.
Thank you so much for saying this. So many people my age need to hear it, especially. Masi, thank you for coming on.
Thank you so
much. Being my first guest, I'm so honored. Masi Alinejad. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thanks for joining us today. And remember, like a sculptor starting with a block of stone and the tools to form it, each of our thoughts, choices, and actions, big and small, shapes who we are. So let's think clearly, choose wisely, and act with principle and determination. See you tomorrow.